Now on ITV1, Boris Johnson sits down for a special and exclusive interview with Tom Bradby. This is Boris Johnson, The Interview.
As a child, Boris Johnson famously dreamt of becoming world king. Whilst he may not have reached quite those heights, his time as leader was nothing short of extraordinary, culminating in a spectacular fall from grace that saw critics accusing him of destroying Britain's place on the world stage. Tonight, I sit down with the former Prime Minister ahead of the publication of his memoirs to discuss his time in office. He's been called a political Houdini, with a talent for breaking the rules and surviving scandals against the odds.
Do you regret your comments, sir?
I want you to have a cup of tea.
Skills, characteristics that took him to the pinnacle of British politics.
The time has come to act, to take decisions, to give strong leadership and to change this country for the better.
His political memoir shows few regrets and, one might argue, little insight.
Let's get Brexit done.
There's no doubt that he was loved by many until he wasn't.
Boris out! Boris out!
He takes aim at Brexit mastermind Dominic Cummings, successor Rishi Sunak, and even campaigning footballer Marcus Rashford. Many have questioned whether he had the character for the challenges of being Prime Minister.
Does the truth matter?
I think it does, and I think it's very important.
Not least in an unprecedented pandemic.
There was no party, no COVID rules were broken.
His fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
In his book, Johnson remains unrepentant. He says the UK's heroic vaccine rollout wouldn't have been possible without Brexit, which drove the EU potty, he says. He describes apologising for Partygate.
People had a right to expect better of their Prime Minister.
As a catastrophic mistake. There's no doubt he is one of the most charismatic characters British politics has seen for a generation. So how did he squander his 80-seat majority? Today, Johnson speaks to me about the witch hunts, the plots, and how the whole damn establishment was set against him. Boris Johnson, thank you very much for joining me. In your book, you say that people have referred to you over the course of your career as a renegade, a buffoon, a thug, a bull in a china shop. How would you describe yourself? Or another way of putting it is, who is the real Boris Johnson?
Well, it's perfectly true. Thank you very much, Tom, for having me on. It's perfectly true that there is plenty in Unleashed, the book I'm just bringing out, of self-recrimination. I try to examine the things I got wrong, but I also want to try to tell a story about what I believe in and about belief in Britain, which is really at the heart of the book. And so if you ask who's the real Boris Johnson, so my political identity is really defined by that belief. Somebody who is relentlessly positive, but also positive about this country.
Well, let's talk about Brexit. Is, as you say, a defining part of your legacy. Isn't it, truthfully, we've known each other a long time, isn't it fair to say that in your decision to go for the Out campaign, there was a pretty healthy chunk of personal ambition that you thought that you'd probably lose, but you'd endear yourself to the Tory membership? Would you acknowledge that there is some fairness in that suggestion?
I don't. I think what people forget is what would have happened to Leave if we had lost. We would have been treated like a kind of failed Powerlite frond of has-beens and losers.
You'd have been the darling of the members. You would. You know that. That was part of the calculation, surely.
No, because actually what would have happened was everybody would have wanted to move on. And the story would have been all about our future within Europe. And, people, it was a big, what I'm trying to get over is that it was a terribly, terribly difficult decision.
Okay,
and I came down in favour of coming out.
Millions of people put their faith in you. They believed in it. They believed what you said about it. And then it was chaos afterwards, as you acknowledge in your book. And you blame a lot of people for that. You blame David Cameron. You blame Theresa May later. You blame the EU. The one person you don't blame is you. And people will find that amazing. You told us that we should do this, and you hadn't devoted any serious thought to what came next.
Come on. So I wanted to win an argument. And I believed in freedom, and I believed that our country had a great, great future.
But you were the leader. You were leading us into this.
What I wasn't trying to do, and I don't think, and certainly what Michael Gove wasn't trying to do, we weren't trying to form the next government. What we expected, and what I think everybody expected, was that the Cameron government, having called a referendum a yes/no choice for the people, Leave Remain choice for the people, would bring forward a white paper.
Why? He didn't believe it. What made you possibly think that would be the outcome?
Because every other European leader, when they hold referendums, decides, once the people have voted, decides what to do and stays in office. So it's not normal for the Prime Minister, having asked for a referendum vote, suddenly to evacuate the stage. Now, you're perfectly right that we, me, Michael Gove, others, suddenly had an awful lot on our plates because we were the Prime Minister had left, and we were in the position of having to try to
make it work,
to take over.
All right, where are we now on Brexit is my next question, and I want to drill into that. Do you accept that everyone watching this programme is poorer now as a result of Brexit and is likely to be poorer for the foreseeable future because of Brexit?
No, I certainly don't. And let me just
give you a statistic. To the Office of Budget Responsibility, the government's own, formerly your own financial watchdog, says that imports will be 15% down in the long-term future than they would have been, and exports, and that the size of our national economy will be 3.8% smaller. You're shaking your head, but these are the facts, according to the Office of Budget Responsibility, which has now been looking at this for quite some time. That is an enormous sum of money. That is an enormous sum of money.
Can I just try and respond on Brexit and the type of Brexit that I wanted and why I still believe in it? Because when I was Prime Minister, we faced an appalling pandemic. And then, thanks to the brilliance, genius of British scientists, we got some vaccines. And there was AstraZeneca, and there was Pfizer, and several others. And because of the type of Brexit that we had negotiated, which we had fought for, let me complete this point, we were able to license those vaccines weeks and weeks faster than any other European country, at a time when many, many people were dying every day.
Said you could have derogated from the European regulation anyway.
We would never have done so. We would never have done so. We were in the EMA. We would have been in the European vaccine programme, and you know that fine well. But because we were out, we did things differently. And so by March 2021, we had vaccinated 45% of the UK adult population, and of the over 80s, probably getting on for 90, 100%, the EU had done 10%. That enabled us to come out of lockdown restrictions faster and, to your economic point, to have the fastest economic recovery in 2021 in the G7. And that was because of Brexit.
Let's pick something else. Trade. This was going to be the great freedom. We've done 71 trade deals. 68 of them were rollovers from the EU deals. The others are tiny. We still haven't done a deal with America. We haven't done a deal with China. We haven't done a deal with India. Where is this great world you promised us?
The India deal is coming down the track. The deals with America depend very much on what happens in the presidential elections. I'm sure you want to ask about. But if you look at the UK's economic performance since 2016, it compares very favourably with other countries that are still in the EU. And the key thing about Brexit now is to take advantage of those freedoms and not to do, and that's why believing in Britain is about doing things differently.
I understand all these arguments, but the reality is, you talk about immigration. That was a
Let's
big
talk about
concern.
immigration.
333.
Let's talk about
No, let me finish. 333,000 people came to this country in 2015. For 2023, it was 685,000.
let me
You talk
explain.
about regret.
Let me
9% of people.
explain.
9% of people think Brexit worked out well. 57% of people think we should go back in. That is the legacy of Brexit, is it not?
No, I think that the legacy of Brexit is that it saved many lives of elderly and vulnerable people at a particularly crucial time for our country. It has given us the freedom to do things differently and better and in the interests of the people of this country.
Let's talk about COVID. COVID hits. You describe it very vividly in your book. In the early days of COVID, January, February 2020, you didn't attend 5 COBRA meetings.
Yes, but COBRA meetings, normally speaking, are
Yeah.
just government meetings that take place about the issue, any issue of the hour.
We know that at one stage your Shakespeare biography was due out in April. Were you in that period
Shakespeare?
focused on of 2020? Were you focused
That's
on writing
complete
them?
nonsense. That is complete.
So that's a no. You
That's
weren't in
complete-
any way
absolute-
writing that book at that time.
Total myth. You know, this was a new disease. People were not sure which way it would go, and if to get to people's concern about the speed of that first lockdown in March.
Do you think people would be alive today if you'd acted quicker?
I can't know that, but what I can tell you is that we had a series of ever-intensifying steps leading up to the March the 23rd of 2020 lockdown. And had I actually gone for full lockdown earlier, that would have been in advance of what the scientists were actually asking us to do. And so it would have been a quite extraordinary thing for a Prime Minister to have ordered the country to take this completely novel step and incarcerate themselves at home before the scientists were even saying that we should do that.
Before we get onto the real question, I want to ask you another question, which is that you write very vividly in your book, Unleashed, about the fact that you almost died.
Yeah, my oxygen levels went down to 72 or something, which is pretty bad. 70 things can get pretty nasty. But and I went into ICU and I saw, sadly, many people like myself, slightly overweight, middle-aged men. And it's a the point I want to make is I know how terrible a disease COVID is. I really do. And as I try to explain in the book, probably, I was groggier coming out, and it took longer for me to recover than I tried to let on, because I had to get back in the saddle and I had to try to give leadership on all these difficult questions. But it left me with an absolute horror of the disease and a deeply serious determination to make sure that we followed the scientific advice and that we protected the people.
We have to take a very short break now, but please do join us when we come back.